Now, there's not much to it, and you might find it pretty obvious, but this is the most important thing to be taken care of. That is why it is tip number one. No matter how good your team looks, if you choose wrong captain from the 11 players you have, that's a bust. You're not gonna get points. And the right assignment of the captain will easily rank your team better no matter how dumb your team looks going into the game week. It depends on your luck too, but you should never overlook the fact that assigning a captain is the main factor for the better points. This is one of the statistical tips because at the end of the season, except for a couple of defenders and keepers who had a stunning season, it's always the midfielders and strikers who end up with more points. Keepers with highest point score up to 130 to 145 points, and it's only one or two keeper. And defender with higher points score up to 150 to 170 points, and it's the same case. It's only one or two defenders. And whereas for the top midfielders, they end up scoring about 170 to 240 points. Strikers with highest point end up with about 180 to 220 points. Alexis Sanchez alone scored 264 points in season 16-17. It mostly depends on a player's form too. I'm not suggesting that a goalkeeper or defender won't outscore a midfielder or a striker, but using your money in midfielder and attacker at crucial part of the season will take you a lot higher in the rankings. Always put bench player with most potential at the front. Many of you might not know, but when one of your player in your starting lineup miss out the game, the first player on the bench replaces it, not the player with the most points. This can save you a lot of points in FPL. One of the mistakes you'd want to stay away from is buying a defensive midfielder, unless he is in a goal scoring form or he is a cheap bench option. Because if you have a defensive midfielder, then the max point you're gonna get from him, no matter how good he plays, is 3 points, unless he scores or assists. Except for that, it's only downhill. Because defensive midfielders tend to concede rather more yellow and red cards than score or assist. The main point of this tip is for avoiding transfer hits and unnecessary loss of points. These are the three lineups with minimum players in their positions. Firstly, in attack, you can have as less as one striker in your lineup. And in midfield, it is two, whereas in the defense, you should have at least three defenders who has 100% playing status. If you go into the game week without meeting these criteria, then you will lose points, as there are no regular players who get time on the pitch or in the bench, and which causes transferring players more than the game week transfers you have, thus transfer hits. I think this one is pretty obvious. Most of them with few years of experience with FPL know that whenever you choose a defender, you go for fullbacks. But when the team is in good defensive run and the center back has a very reliable goalkeeper or is a constant set piece threat and is cheaper than the fullbacks but still delivers more points than the other expensive options, then always go for that center back. There will always be those tall aerial threat center backs who give extra points and is cheaper, which will always help you to give extra money to deploy in players in other positions. And when I say using of chips and wildcard at the right time, when it comes to chips, using it at the double game week is the most appropriate no matter what. It can get better than that. No matter which type of chip, always use it in a double game week. And about the wildcard, I guess you just go with your instincts or when your team is suffering and you don't want to take any more transfer hits. And the last tip is, always check your lineup 2 hours or before FPL starts updating, which will always help you save a lot of points by alerting you about sudden injuries and absence of players in a certain game week. There are other lots of things you can do right and still get disastrous results. But if you follow these steps, I'm sure you'll have points above average every game week. You can watch the FPL shows and analysis too, but since not everyone has time for that, I didn't include it.